We started laughing about the horned rabbits, the way a town laughs to keep from sleeping badly. Grainy photos showed up first on neighborhood Facebook groups. Blurry shapes at dusk, small bodies with dark spines sprouting from the muzzle like burnt matchsticks. Jackalopes, someone wrote, and a retired biology teacher replied with a paragraph about papillomas and folklore, and everybody relaxed because science plus jokes equals safety, right? I work nights for the Parks Department, a dispatcher who knows the voices of coyotes by their vowel sounds and the difference between a skunk complaint and a domestic dispute just by the pitch of panic. On a good shift, I do nothing but log owls. On a bad one, I explain to a crying person why we're not allowed to move an active bear just because he likes their zucchini. So when the first call about a rabbit stuck in a soccer net came in, it's hurt. It has, I don't know, horns? I put on my vest and grabbed the orange rehab tote and figured I'd be home by midnight. The field behind Thompson Elementary were silver with sprinkler mist. My boots chewed mud as I followed the beam of my flashlight past the bleachers. The net hung slack and green, sagging under the weight of one terrified cottontail. It thrashed when I approached, legs tangling deeper. The horns weren't antlers the way the photos made them look more like black, curled fingernails blooming from the lips and cheeks, clustered and glossy. They looked wrong in a way my body recognized before my brain did, the way you recognize a smell from childhood before the memory surfaces. Wrong like a note off key in a lullaby. Hey, I murmured, the way we're trained, keeping my voice low. We're gonna get you out. The rabbit went still the instant my gloved hands touched the net. Not calmer still, like a toy powered off. Its eyes were clouded but bright, a contradiction that made me swallow. The black growths, were they warm? I told myself I imagined a faint radiating heat. I cut the netting with trauma shears. It didn't bolt. It let me lift it. Its heart hammered against my palms with hummingbird insistence. And beneath it I felt a vibration, a faint, steady burr like a phone set to silent on a tabletop. When I brought it closer to my chest, the vibration climbed a half step and my molars ached. I should have driven it to the overnight vet clinic. That was the protocol. But the clinic had started charging intake fees, and I brought them 3 animals last week and got a look from the night tech that said, in nicer words, you again? Also, I told myself, it might be a simple entanglement. I could keep in the tote in my bathroom and drop it at the rehabber in the morning. I said those sentences to myself like steps on a staircase that led to a door marked responsible adult. I ignored the part of me standing in the stairwell shadows, listening. The rabbit didn't move in the passenger seat. The glow from the dash lit the black protrusions, and for a second I thought they were longer than a minute ago. Road hypnosis, I decided. Streetlights smeared by the mist, and as I drove past the radio towers out by the feed mill, the rabbit's vibration deepened. The FM went to static for half a mile, a long hiss like wind through teeth, before settling back into late-night jazz. When I glanced down, the rabbit's ears were angled not toward me, not toward the sound, but toward the towers looming blankly against the sky, their red beads blinking in unison like slow, tired eyes. At home, the house held its midnight quiet, the hum of the refrigerator, the old clock's count. I lined the bathroom tub with towels and lifted the rabbit into the nest, looping a soft towel loosely over its body the way the rehabber taught me. Turn them into a burrito, make the world smaller, safe. Up close, the gross looked like something the fire had licked and left ebony, ribbed, with tips that tapered to black petals. A thin white film web between the clusters at the corners of the mouth. Not mucus, not anything I could name. I took 3 photos, the way we're supposed to. For the intake form I'd fill out in the morning, the bathroom fan rattled. The rabbit's chest moved. My phone didn't have signal in the interior hallway, so I stepped into the garage to send the photos to the rehabber. The garage smelled like old paint and coal dust. On the shelf sat the ham radio my father left me, a beautiful, boxy relic I kept for sentiment. The way people keep wetting china, they never eat off. He used to talk to strangers at 2 in the morning while I lay under the table, listening to voices bounce off the ionosphere and imagining a world where distance was only suggestion. When I opened my phone and hit send, the rabbit's vibration bled into the concrete. That's the only way I can describe it. The floor picked up a whisper. The metal shelves took up a tone. The ham radio's face, dark and unplugged, flickered the faintest suggestion of backlight waking. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself a lot of things in those 5 seconds because the other option was new and unwelcome. I took a step closer, and the radio lit fully, pale green, numbers ghosting the glass. From the bathroom came a soft tack, tack, tack. I crossed the house in 3 strides. The rabbit was where I left it. Mostly, the towel had shifted. One of the black growths touched the side of the tub. Tack. Not a random twitch. A beat. Tack. Tack. The growths weren't rigid after all. They flexed, slow as roots finding a crack. The bathroom fan shivered and died. The strip of light under the door lifted and dropped with each gentle tap, like a diaphragm breathing in and out. "Okay," I said to no one. "Okay." I slid the tote back over the rabbit. The growths flexed again very slightly, as if tasting plastic air holes, the way barnacles taste current. That should have been my threshold. I should have grabbed the carrier and gone to the clinic and begged forgiveness from the night tech. Instead, I went back in the garage, because the ham radio unplugged. Mind you now showed a frequency I recognized from childhood, 5.123, my father's favorite. Not a station anyone local used. A place he wanted to talk to men with voices like late rain. The speaker hissed. Static separated like beaded curtains. A voice, thinner than it should have been, found the gap. "Do you hear us now?" It said, not a question. It said it with the flat certainty of a weather report, of a diagnosis. The words were wrong in my ears, as if they had to cross a language and came through flensed. In the bathroom, on the other side of the wall, something tapped in perfect time with the voice on the radio, as if the message had 2 mouths. "Tack, do you hear us now?" Tack. My father used to rest his hand on the radio's warm lid, while the voices slid over the globe like ghosts. I rested my palm on cold metal and felt the motor of the world turn. "Yes," I said, and I meant that I heard. I did not mean that I understood. The radio exhaled static, like a long-delayed laugh. "Good," the voice said, and in the bathroom the tapping stopped. The house held its breath, and every clock in the place ticked to the same second. The house felt newly arranged, as if some invisible hand had nudged all the furniture a half-inch closer to a center I couldn't see. The radio breathed in a slow, patient hiss. "Who is this?" I asked. But I meant it like a child means it when the hallway is dark and somebody is standing in it. My voice came out smaller than I liked. "We are the ones you've always heard and never understood," said the radio. And behind the thin metallic rasp was a second layer, a faint, almost tactile burr that matched the rabbit's tremor. "He taught you to listen." "My father," I said before I could stop myself. "Your father," the voice agreed. It shifted subtle, like a guitar player changing finger position, and for a half-breath, I heard my father's cadence, the rounded vowels he got from his mother, the small nasal lift on the ends of sentences. "Kiddo," it added, soft enough to puncture. I pressed my hand hard on the radio skin until my palm stung. "Don't," I said. "We borrow tongues," it said, and the bathroom wall tapped once, as if nodding. "You brought us one with a good root. We speak more clearly through grown mouths." It meant the growths, the black, curling tongues. The thought tried to sit down inside me, and I shoved it off the chair. I went back inside, down the short hall, and eased the bathroom door open. The fan was still, the air a touch warmer than the hall, as if the small room had collected the heat of its own fear. The rabbit lay in its towel wrap exactly as before, but every place the growths touched fabric to fibers had darkened, like cloth held near a candle flame. "Hey!" I whispered, as if I were sneaking up on a tide. One of the growths lifted a fraction and tapped the tub. "Tack." From the garage, the radio. "We are old," it said, but the towers helped. Your father liked the towers. He liked talking to people. I said, which was true and not. "We are people." The radio said with no irony at all. "We are many people, arranged." You call that static. It is only the crowd before the choir. My phone found a bar of signal, apparently offended by being left out. A text from Mara. The rehabber popped through, triple buzzed, then sat on the screen like a hand on my shoulder. Mara, that's papillomavirus for sure. Do not keep it in your house. They can't bite through much, but keep it quarantined. Bring it first thing. If it's not eating, call me now. Another bubble appeared and half-typed dots pulsed, stopped, pulsed. Then the message unfurled in a rush. Mara, do you hear it tapping? The bathroom felt suddenly too narrow. The rabbit's ears shifted, slowly aligning with me, then past me to the wall that backed onto the garage. Behind that wall, the radio breathed. The gross flexed, tasting the humid air, not faster, not slower, but with terrible patience, like plants that believed in minutes. I typed, yes. Then, because I needed something simple to be true, I typed, it's the bathroom fan. I did not hit send. The letters fuzzed, stroked by a gentle static. For a heartbeat, the word fan slid into fat, and then into far, and then the whole line diluted like it had been written on damp paper. The phone went black. It hadn't died. I could feel the haptic heartbeat of a device deciding something about me. Do not invite more, said the radio, as if I'd asked for a specific brand of disaster. Carry the mouth to the place of red eyes. The towers, I said. The towers, it agreed. They are very kind to us. They let us braid. No, I said, and now my voice had some edges. I'm taking it to clinic. No interference, said the radio. But the word tilted strangely, like a sign hung slightly crooked. The bathroom gross tapped the tub in a patient measure, as if they could practice a word until it lay flat. I lifted the tote's lid, slid hands under towel and rabbit together, making a bundle. The gross flexed and, for an instant, brushed the skin of my wrist through the glove. Not hot, not cold, a sensation like a syllable on flesh, a pressure with grammar. The rabbit's heart scissored against my palm so frantically I flinched and almost set it down again. It's okay, I said to both of us. We're leaving. When I stepped into the hall, every clock in the house ticked one beat louder, as if they approved of forward motion. The front door's deadbolt was a small, sane metal noise. I should have looked through the peephole first. I didn't. The porch light spilled a gentle cone, and the air smelled like wet soil and cut grass and something else that writhed behind late summer, an undertow rot that says hurry up, the year's ending. I stepped onto the porch, and my foot found a softness my welcome mat didn't have yesterday. Rabbits. Half a dozen at first. Then, when my eyes adjusted to the pulse of the motion light, more. A yard of rabbits, small and big, mottled and plain, arranged without arranging themselves, not touching but correctly spaced like stones laid in a careful path. Some were clean-faced. Some had small black nubs at the lips, shy as dimples. A few had begun to bloom, dark curls like burnwood roses. Their ears were all turned toward me, then, with minute shiver, toward the toad in my hands. The movement rippled through them the way wind moves wheat. They did not advance. They didn't need to. It felt as if I set my bundle down on the porch, they would politely roll the earth up under it to carry it away. The motion light made their eyes into small coins. Beyond them, in the lot where the grocery closed 2 years ago, the radio towers shouldered the sky. Their red aircraft lights blinked with the steady patience of a heartbeat. Back inside, I told myself out loud like command to a dog, but my body understood something I did not, and it turned toward the driveway, toward the car. The rabbits did not follow. They shifted, and the shift drew a path through absence, a space no rabbit occupied, an aisle across my lawn I had never owned. I got as far as the car before the dashboard lights woke, unasked. The radio car radio this time sprang to life without my touch and sang 2 measures of song my father loved, not on any station I could find the dial, then cleared its throat and let the voice in. You carry us already, it said, and I felt the tote pulse like a small, steady drum. Why make your arms tired? I set the tote carefully on the passenger seat and buckled it in, because that is what you do when you are pretending this is a normal errand. The gross flexed and brushed the seat belt and left nothing visible behind, but the belt looked slightly darker anyway. I turned the key. The engine coughed, thought better of it, coughed again. The 3rd time it caught with a shiver that ran all the way up my arms. I pulled out of the driveway. careful not to touch any rabbit I didn't have to, and the rabbits watched and did not move, and as I turned onto Hillcrest, I saw them shift again to close the aisle behind me like polite ushers. "The clinic," I said, and the voice in two speakers, radio and radio, said, with the infinite patience of a tide, "The red eyes first." The roads out past midnight were always lonely, but that night the loneliness had a pulse. Every intersection light turned green before I reached it, like the city wanted me gone. The toad on the passenger seat shivered with a rhythm I didn't want to decode. I kept my eyes straight ahead, pretending not to notice the faint scraping sound as when the gross tapped the plastic wall in time with the radio tower's distant blinking. I told myself again, clinic, drop it at the emergency desk, sign the form, walk out. I'd deal with the rehabber in the morning. But the radio disagreed. From the dash, left. I tightened my grip on the wheel. No, left. It said again, gentle but immovable, like water explaining the concept of drowning. At the next light, I turned right on purpose, an act of rebellion as small and sour as a child sticking out his tongue. The moment I did, the headlights flickered, and the entire block of houses went dark. Every porch light, every street lamp, every window gone. Just my beams carving a tunnel in black. The engine made a sound like it had swallowed sand. The tote pulsed. The rabbit shifted, and one of the growths brushed against the window glass. The sound was faint but clear. Tack. Behind the sound came another, a whisper. Not words. More like the hush of a crowd gathering, thousands breathing in unison. "I'm taking you to the vet," I said out loud, like volume could make it real. "The towers," the radio crooned, voice layered on voice. "You know this path. He walked it before you." I slammed the radio knob off. Silence. My heart loosened a notch. Then, from the tote, tack, 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 a deliberate triplet, as if the growths themselves were knocking, and in my teeth, deep inside the roots, I felt the vibration spell out. Listen. I pulled over at the edge of an empty soccer field, the kind of suburban green belt that looks cheerful in daylight and skeletal at night. I killed the engine, sat there with the ticking metal cooling, and breathed. The tote vibrated steadily. "Okay," I muttered, throat dry. "Okay, what do you want from me?" The growths flexed against the plastic, and then God help me, they arranged themselves. Through the perforated lid, I saw them curl into angles, forming shapes too precise to be chance. For a second, they looked like letters written in an alphabet I'd almost learned, the kind you dream of in fever. The pattern shifted, settled, and then with a soft, wet sound, one black growth pressed hard enough to poke through a vent hole. It reached blindly but with certainty. I shoved the tote onto the back seat and wrapped it in the old emergency blanket I kept for snowstorms. My gloves trembled as I tucked the fabric around it, making the world small again. The tapping stopped. The rabbit went still. I stared at the mirror. My face looked gray in the reflection, eyes hollow as if the car had eaten some of me. In the distance, I could see the radio towers blinking their red eyes in rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Always there, always calling. When I turned the key again, the dash lights pulsed not their usual amber, but faint green glow. My father's glow. The color of his ham radio in the garage. The engine started smooth this time. Too smooth, like it had been oiled by something not meant for engines. "Fine," I whispered. The towers first. But then the clinic. The road bent toward the fields. Out here the air grew thinner, cleaner, as if less belonged to people and more to whatever had lived here long before. Fence posts blurred past like tally marks. Every so often a rabbit darted across the beam, but never hit, never wrong place, wrong time. They all moved with the same unbroken rhythm, ushering me forward. When I reached the dirt service road that led to the towers, the car turned on its own. My hands were on the wheel, but it was like holding a horse that had already decided. The closer I got, the stronger the vibration, not just from the tote, now through the ground, the tires, the steering column, a hum that belonged in bones more than ears. The towers loomed, 3 of them, their steel legs lit in red pulses. Up close, they weren't blinking randomly. They were speaking, Morse code, maybe, or something older. I parked at the base of the tallest. The tote shivered, insistent. I wrapped both hands around it, pulled it to my chest, and stepped into the open field. The night air smelled metallic, sharp. Above me, the red lights blinked in sequence, and for a dizzy moment, I swore the pattern spelled out a word. Welcome. And then, for the first time since I'd picked it up, the rabbit made a sound. Not a cry, not a squeal. A low, almost human groan that rose and felt like someone trying to remember a melody. I nearly dropped the tote. The ground beneath the tower vibrated, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. Screen cracked to life on its own. No signal, no bars, just a single notification. Dad, pick up. The message froze me. My father had been dead 6 years. He never owned a smartphone, never texted in his life. Still, the glow on my cracked screen pulsed like a heartbeat. Dad, pick up. The hum from the towers thickened, climbed into my ribs. I swiped without meaning to, and the speaker filled with static, then his voice. Not a memory, not a recording. His voice. Kiddo. The word landed like a hand on my shoulder. Warm, familiar, impossible. I gripped the phone so hard it creaked. Dad. The static hushed, forming a kind of room around us. Then, you opened the door. You shouldn't have. I didn't, my throat locked. It was just a rabbit. No such thing anymore. His voice cracked, the way it used to when he'd been on air too long. They'd been waiting, using mouths, using towers. You let one in. I looked down at the tote. The rabbit had pressed itself against the mesh, growths writhing like blackened roots sniffing air. One of them brushed the vent hole and tapped against my jacket zipper with eerie accuracy. Tack. What do they want? I asked. The pause was long, filled with the hiss of 1,000 distant conversations. Then, to be heard, to speak, through us. The towers blinked faster now, the red lights falling into a new rhythm that felt uncomfortably close to a pulse. My father's voice thinned, as if being stretched across too much distance. I tried to warn them, he said. On the bands, nobody listened. The static thickened. Then, underneath, I heard something else. A chorus. Not one voice, not 200s layered. They weren't speaking English, but the sound coiled through my skull like it had meaning anyway. Words my nerves recognized, if not my mind. I staggered back. The tote slipped, hit the dirt, and rolled once. The lid cracked. From inside came a spill of tapping. Furious now, every growth beating the plastic in perfect time with the red blink of the towers. My phone screen fractured into lines, green numbers dripping down like rain. The chorus grew louder. No, I hissed. I scooped up the tote, clamped it to my chest. You're not staying here. The voices rose to a shout without volume. My eyes watered. My ears felt full of salt. Dad. I yelled into the static. Tell me what to do. For one breath, the crowd silenced, and my father's voice broke through, sharp and urgent. Burn it. The word scorched me. I looked at the tote in my arms, the rabbit twisting inside, the black growths flexing like fingers hungry for touch. Burn it. I stumbled back to the car, every step vibrating with the hum of the towers. When I opened the trunk, the dome light flickered weakly. An old gaskin from last winter's Snowblower sloshed half full. I yanked it out, unscrewed the lid. The tote writhed. One growth curled fully through the vent hole now, thin and searching, like a tongue tasting the night. Burn it, I whispered, echoing him. But as I lifted the can, the rabbit cried again that strange, almost human groan, and for an instant, I saw my father's face in his clouded eyes. Not a trick of memory, a reflection that shouldn't have been there. The gaskin tipped. The smell filled the air, sharp and dizzying. My hands shook so badly liquid splashed my boots. The rabbit thrashed, and the growths beat against the tote, spelling something in their horrible code. Tack, 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 tack. And then the towers stopped blinking. All three red lights froze on. The night held its breath. The chorus fell silent, and a single voice, clear as bells, rang from the radio towers themselves. Choose. The word hung there like a held breath. Choose. The tower's light stayed fixed, Red coins nailed to the dark. Even the insect had paused, as if the night itself wanted to hear what I'd do. "Dad," I whispered into the cracked phone, because I knew if I said his name like a question, the world might answer. Static braided into a rope, and for one heartbeat his voice came clear, the old affection, the old command. "Fire makes a line, kiddo." He sounded tired or far. "They can't cross what's already ash." "And if I'm wrong?" I said, throat Freddy. "If I'm burning just a sick rabbit?" He didn't answer. Or he did, and the crowd swallowed him. The chorus returned, not loud but numerous, a pressure in the bone around my ears like weather. The growth curls of the tote's vent hole tested the air in slow, confident arcs, tasting choice. "Give it back." The other voice said many voices arranged to sound kind. It spoke through my dashboard, through my phone's dead speaker, through the silent radio towers, as if they were throats held open by red thorns. "We can tow him better. We can borrow him longer. Put down the flame." Gasoline slicked my glove. The can was heavier than it should have been, or my arm weaker. I could see the reflection of those red lights and the sheen on the tote's lid. The rabbit turned on its side, and for an instant the growths arranged themselves into a shape so precise my mind almost made sense of it. The letter my father used as a call sign, the first initial of our last name. Then they uncurled, innocent black flowers. "Choose," the field said without saying. I tipped the can. The smell leaped sharp, alchemical. The tote darkened where the fuel soaked in. The rabbit's body went rigid, and the growth of the vent hole drew back an inch, then reached again. Tack. It tapped the plastic twice in a pattern my nervous system recognized the way you recognize your own name shouted in the crowd. "Kiddo, came my father, urgent now, thinner, a filament that might snap? Don't let them sing through you." My hand shook. The lighter I carried for camp stove sat in the trunk's lip. Green plastic scuffed. I flicked the wheel. The flame rose with cheerful, ordinary hiss. Utterly wrong in this made realm. The tower's red eyes pulsed once, as if flinching. "Wait," the many said, soft with promise. "We will make your house full of him again. You will hear him at breakfast. You will hear him when it rains. You will never miss him in the late hours. He will say what he never got to." I hadn't known you could grieve all over again, fresh and raw, in the exact shape of decision. The lighter's flame shivered in the little wind the towers made. My heart beat. So hard my vision spotted white. "Dad," I said, and I meant I'm sorry, and I meant will you forgive me, and I meant I can't do this kind of math without you. Lines, the last of him said, like a benediction and a goodbye. I set the flame to the tote. The fire didn't bloom like a movie. It tasted first, a blue kiss, then found the gasoline and took a breath and became itself. Heat lifted in a rush. The growths withered where the flame licked them, not like hair, but like something that thought it was stone until it remembered it was meat. The rabbit screamed, and the sound had a person's shape. It punched me in a place no organ lives. The towers strobed off, on, off, too fast, like a heartbeat in panic. The chorus keened, slipping in and out of human registers, not words but the implication of words, and for a second the red lights lined up on a far tower to spell a single terrible syllable my mouth could have formed if my tongue were an ash. And oh, the rabbits came. Not from the edges of the field, I hadn't seen them there, but from the ground itself, from the seams and depressions and forgotten burrows. Gray bodies boiling up in a terrible, orderly tide. They didn't rush me. They arranged themselves in a ring around the fire and thumped their hind feet in unison. The thumping was not random. It matched the tower strobe. It matched the Oldham frequency. Tack, 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 a pattern that wanted to be a door. I stepped back, boots skidding in scrub. Fire ate the tote, the towel, the bowing plastic. Black smoke rose, carrying a sweet rot smell like wet wood and old flowers. Shapes lifted in the smoke, petal thin, ember dark, cinder light. For a second I thought they were ash motes flipping end over end, but then one of them steered. It pivoted midair like a hawk banking and came for my face. I slapped it away on instinct. It stuck to my glove, seared without heat, and I had the animal certainty of something trying to crawl down to the pores and live where nerves carry messages. I scraped my hand on the rusted lip of the trunk, and the thing slid free, fell into the grass, and writhed until a flame found it and wrote it into history. The rabbit went quiet. It was a horrible mercy. The growths that had not already curled on themselves lifted once like fingers learning the reluctance of letting go, and then collapsed into glossy black crusts. The ring of rabbits thumped once more in perfect chorus and fell silent, ears pricked like antennae waiting for a transmission. The towers stuttered back into their measured blink. Somewhere inside the static, my father made a sound that could have been a sigh, or could have been the last bit of tape reaching the end. Smoke threaded my nose and lodged there, a thought I could not shake. I picked up the gaskin with my clean hand and poured a figure 8 around the burning tote. The way you saw the threshold when every story you ever loved finally decides to matter. Fire followed, obedient. The ring of rabbits loosened. "Interference," said the car radio, voice thin and offended. A teacher noting vandalism on a clean white board. Line, I said back, and maybe it was a smoke, but I laughed, and it sounded unlike any sound I remembered making. In the laugh's echo I felt it, a sting in my palm. The glove had torn when I scraped off the cinder. In the crescent of flesh below my thumb, one black flake had lodged like a chip of nail. It pulsed, not with heat, with grammar. My skin answered in a language no blood should speak. Tack, soft, eager, practicing. No! I whispered in my own hand, as if it were a dog about to do the wrong trick. I squeezed the spot until tears started. The cinder wriggled deeper one fraction of fraction, and my mouth filled with the taste of penny coins and old radio tubes. The chorus leaned in. I didn't hear a single word. I heard 1,000 throats place themselves behind one syllable and aim it at me like a gift and a threat both. You. Behind me, the last plastic of the tote sagged into flame and then into nothing. In front of me, the ring of rabbits parted, not fleeing, simply opening a path. The towers blinked with patient approval. I closed my fist around the splinter in my palm and did not know yet whether the line I burned kept anything out, or whether it merely marked the place where they would begin again from me. I drove home with the window down, letting smoke trail out like a bad conscience. My fist throbbed on the steering wheel, wrapped in my spare bandana. But the ache wasn't from flesh. It pulsed in time with the towers still glowing behind me, as if something in that tiny shard of black still listened, still called. Every stop sign blurred by. I don't remember the turns. My body carried me home on muscle memory, like it had done after night shifts, after funerals, after too much whiskey. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked wrong, slouched, dim, like it had heard a secret it shouldn't have. The rabbits were gone. Not one in the yard, not even the soft trails they left in grass. Just absence and silence heavy enough to press on my teeth. Inside, the clocks ticked normally again. Too normally. I stood in the hallway, listening. The bathroom door was still ajar from when I'd fled, and the towels I'd lined the tub with lay rumpled, faintly charred at the edges as if the fire had followed me home in whispers. I set my phone on the counter. Dead screen. No crackle, no phantom messages. The silence almost convinced me I'd imagined it all. Almost. Then my glove slipped off as I peeled it back, and I saw what I already felt. The black flake lodged under the skin below my thumb had melted into a shape that was no longer foreign. A nub. A small, glossy, curling nub, like the first shoe of a nail that grew wrong. I pressed on it with my other hand. Pain spiked, sharp enough to make me gasp, but the nub flexed back, resilient. Worse, when I leaned closer, I swear I saw it pulse, like it was practicing the rhythm. Tack, tack. No, I told out loud. The lights flickered. Not all at once, first the kitchen, then the hall, then the lamp by my father's old chair. They pulsed in time with the nub. And then, faintly, the ham radio in the garage came to life again. Do you hear us now? I nearly collapsed. My father's voice, but not woven into that same lattice of many, too many. Not you? I whispered, staggering toward the garage door. Not again. The garage was colder than the night outside, the concrete sweating. The radio's pale green glow painted the shelves. I hadn't touched the thing since I'd left for the towers, and yet its dial spun gently, numbers chasing themselves. The nub in my hand pulsed faster. The radio responded, adjusting, syncing. You burn one mouth, the many voice said. We open another. We like the root you carry. It's strong. I slammed my palm against the workbench. Pain roared, but the nub stayed, stubborn. The splinter might have sunk deeper. Blood welled around it, thin, watery. What do you want from me? I shouted. The radio hissed. For a heartbeat, through the chorus, came a single thread, my father again. Fainter now, like he was being pulled away on a current. Lines, he rasped. Draw another before they... The voice cut, devoured by static. The radio dial spun wildly, then froze. The nub in my palm gave one hard tap. Tack. The bathroom fan started on its own. The hallway light blinked. From outside, faint but unmistakable, came the synchronized thump of rabbit feet. Not a dozen. Hundreds. My knees almost buckled. I grabbed the gas can again, though it was nearly empty, and stumbled toward the front door. Through the glass I saw them. The yard filled edge to edge, eyes shining like scattered coins, ears turned toward the house. Their bodies didn't move, only their feet thumping, perfectly timed. And in that thumping I heard it, my own heartbeat caught and copied. The nub in my hand answered. Tack, tack, tack. They weren't just outside anymore. They were in me. The thumping outside copied my heartbeat until I couldn't tell who was keeping time for whom. The nub in my palm ticked once, twice, eager as a metronome finding its song. The ham radio's face glowed a saintly green, waiting to be a throat. I saw the future in one crooked frame, the growths curling out from my hand like glossy black cuticles, my mouth shaping borrowed syllables, my house a-high with red-eyed towers of queens. Lines, I said, and the words steadied me like a handrail in a dark stairwell. I grabbed the only things I could think of that behaved like rules, a 12-pound bag of water softener salt that had lived in the garage since I bought the house, and the last slosh of gasoline. I shouldered the door. The yard rabbits didn't scatter. They simply adjusted to make room for me, like water settling after you lower your hand into a bowl. I walked the perimeter of the house and poured salt in a rough, stubborn ring. The crystals hit the concrete with a hiss that wasn't a sound so much as a refusal. Where the porch met the lawn, I poured a bright, thin braid of fuel and set it alight with a green camp lighter. Flame hesitated, then decided to agree. It ran along the fuel like a sentence underlined. The rabbits thumped harder, pressing close to the bright line without crossing. Their eyes shone, coins and a wishing well nobody should use. Out beyond them, the towers blinked in displeasure long, short as if tapping a reprimand on the sky. The ham radio muttered from the garage, "Do you hear us now? Do you hear us now?" And the nub in my palm answered, a chirp inside flesh. I had made a nice fence of the yard. I had not made one for myself. Inside again, I yanked the radio's power cord from the wall. The glow remained. Of course it did. I unscrewed the coax. The fat umbilical that used to run to the roof antenna, my father patted like a good dog. I wrapped the cable around my forearm like a tourniquet, the cold braid biting, and hauled the whole boxy thing to the front steps. The rabbits watched with that polite, collective stillness that frightened me more than teeth. The flames around the porch edge bent in a low wind that hadn't been there a moment ago, drawn breath, preparing a sentence. I looked at the radio, the thing my father loved, the thing that had carried him past his chair to the other men awake at 2 a.m., and I felt the grief rise again, old and new. "I'm sorry," I told the machine in a memory. Then I tossed the radio over the salt line into the small fire. It didn't explode. It protested. Metal pinged as cases warped. Plastic sagged and blistered. The pale green died resentfully, then flared, then died for good. A sound that might have been a choir scaled down into gnats rose and tore. The towers blinked so fast the red became almost steady. In my palm the nub screamed. That's the only word I have for what nerves can do when they decide to make sound without asking your mouth. I ran to the kitchen, turned the gas burner high, blue and loud. I didn't let myself think. I didn't say a prayer. I pressed the wounded palm down. The world narrowed to stove and skin, a bright coin of now. The nub thrashed, a small animal trying to burrow. But the fire was a line drawn so clean, even the many couldn't argue with it. The smell made my stomach heave. Dots burst across my vision like cheap fireworks. Somewhere far away, the rabbits' thumping accelerated panic, anger, plea. My father's voice rode through the boiling static one more time, a thread pulled between two fingers. "Hold," he said. "Not a lecture. A blessing. Hold the line." I did. I held until I felt it, that tiny rawness curling on itself like a leaf touched by frost, then go slack. The sound inside my bones stopped. The lights in the house unworried. Steady again. Outside, the thumping faltered, fell out of rhythm, then at last dissolved into the ordinary, lonely quiet of midnight. When I lifted my hand, the skin was a raw coin stamped with a hard black comma burnt into its rim, a scar in the shape of a pause. The ham radio in the yard had slumped into silence. The towers, emptied of their brief fury, returned to their aviation patience. The rabbits sat another 5 breaths, ears cocked, listening to a program that wasn't on anymore. Then, as one organism remembering what 100 small bodies are for, they turned and flowed back into the dark. No scurry, just absence. The quiet that followed had weight. I stood in it until my knees stopped notifying me. I watered the line of flame with a hose, and the hiss sounded like relief. I swept up the salt where it had clumped and poured more where it looked thin. I bandaged my hand without looking at it, because there's only so much of yourself you can meet in one night. When I finally slipped between sheets that smelled faintly of smoke, the house breathed with me instead of for me, and the clocks ticked on their own time. In the morning, I told work I had the flu. I drove to the towers in bright, ordinary daylight, and there was nothing to see but steel and guy wires and a sign that said no trespassing and meant the opposite of what I needed it to. The burn circle in the field had gone dull and wide. A few black petals clung to char, glossy as seaweed. I shoveled them into a contractor bag and drove them to the dump and watched them vanish under a backhoe's indifferent weight. Mara texted twice, "You okay? Bring any others?" Hearing reports, and I wrote back sorry. Phone died. Might have one later. I didn't have a shape for last night that would fit in a text bubble. Days passed. The posts on the neighborhood group slowed, fewer photos of rabbits with black roses on their mouths. More bickering about sprinklers and parking. I slept with the bandage for a while. Then without it, the scar stayed, a charred comb in my palm that never softened. Sometimes, washing dishes, I felt the faintest almost tap in the old wound memory or misfire or echo, and I pressed the place gently and told it no, and it obeyed. Mostly, at dusk, I still caught myself looking toward the grocery lot, because habits are just agreements you keep with fear. The towers blinked their measured red. I rebuilt the ham radio in my head more than once, then didn't in my hands. I kept the salt in the garage, lit off like a threat and a promise both. On the first rain, I pulled a chair under the porch and drank coffee and listened. The water made the house sound like a ship. Somewhere out in the wet, a rabbit thumped once, then again, as if testing whether anyone was still counting. The clocks in my house all ticked the same second, without coordination. That should have scared me. It didn't. I thought of my father, of his hand warm on a radio case that hummed with storms you could only hear if you knew what frequency grief was broadcast in. He had been right about lines. The trick was not to pretend the world doesn't want in. The trick was to draw them anyway, and keep drawing them, even when the red eyes blinked slow and kind as a heartbeat. A week later, on a still night, I turned off every light, stood in the kitchen, and felt for the hush that comes before a choir. It wasn't there. The nub of my palm held its peace. The house belonged to me and to dust and to ordinary loneliness. And then the refrigerator motor clicked on a simple domestic rumble, and for a second, in the rise of that vibration, a voice I didn't know slid one syllable across the gap between what is and what waits. Now! I put my scar to the cool, humming mellow the way my father's hand used to rest on warm radio lids. No, I said, gentle as a shut door. Not tonight. The motor went on being a motor. The rain tap-typed on the gutters. Outside, the towers blinked like distant lighthouses for planes that had nothing to do with me. I turned the kettle on, sat in my father's old chair, and listened to clocks perform their small, stubborn miracle, each second taken in turn, each line drawn, each line held.